Do you need this, Mrs. Kemp?
Hello everybody, this is Mad Matt. Why is my mouth not moving? Because this effect takes too damn long in post. You're watching Movie Mattness. Recently I began reading the book Everyday Survival, Why Smart People Do Stupid Things by Lawrence Gonzalez. The thesis of this tome is that modern man has fallen into a pattern where he creates scripts for his daily life that prevent him from thinking critically about his surroundings. As a consequence, he often places himself in dangerous situations because he believes himself to be perfectly safe. One example given is the Thailand tsunami of 2004, where a significant number of tourists stood on the beach watching the wave as it approached, oblivious to the threat until it swept them into the ocean. They had no behavioral script for surviving a tsunami. As such, it was simply a beautiful act of nature that mesmerized them until it was too late. The crazy thing is, the dangers that our internal scripts seem to obscure are not limited to life-threatening situations. Our scripts can lock us into destructive patterns that affect our personal and professional lives as well, often with disastrous results. I find it interesting that Gonzalez uses the term script to describe these mental models, because one of the great films of all time, Federico Fellini's 8½, epitomizes a filmmaker's behavioral script affecting the literal script for the film he is making. 8½ is about Guido Anselmi, a filmmaker with director's block, and is played by the inimitable Marcello Mastroianni. He is a case study of Lawrence Gonzalez's theory. The fact that Guido is Fellini's autobiographical doppelganger makes the story all that more intriguing, taking the couch trip of an artist and turning it into a work of art. If I was asked to summarize 8½ in a few words, my best answer would be a line from the song Hotel Hobbies by the British rock group Marillion. The only sign of life is the ticking of a pen, introducing characters to memories like old friends. To me, this line best summarizes the creative process, and perhaps it is about Guido himself, since Marillion's former frontman and lyricist Derek William Dick, aka Fish, is an unabashed Fellini aficionado. Indeed, 8½ is the creative process made flesh, an anti-narrative about the absence of creativity in a once creative genius, and his disturbing retreat into a dark place within, where memories and characters make each other's acquaintance. But to fully grasp how this evolves, perhaps a bit of backstory is in order. In 1962, Federico Fellini was at the top of his game. His last full-length feature, La Dolce Vita, had propelled him to international stardom, but with success came constant scrutiny and a concatenation of personal demands. While struggling with creative block and the pressure to produce his next masterpiece, Fellini was inspired to turn his own creative dilemma into a film narrative. The title comes from the fact that at that point Fellini had made 6 feature films, but had also collaborated on 3 more, which he counted as half a film each, making this new project his 8½ film. The film opens with a memorable dream sequence that establishes Guido's situation. Guido sits in his car in a traffic jam, unnerved by the grotesque faces of other drivers that stare at him. When smoke begins to pour from his car's heater, Guido struggles to escape, but his doors will not open and his windows will not roll down. Gagging and choking, Guido crawls out of his car's sunroof and suddenly begins to fly, first hovering over traffic, then ascending into the clouds. Just when it seems he is truly free, he notices a rope about his ankle, the other end held by a young publicist on the beach below, who under the direction of a middle-aged attorney pulls Guido back to Earth. Guido falls into the sea and at last awakens from the nightmare, gasping for air. The symbolism of the dream is blatant as it charts Guido's process, the suffocation of his success, his desire for creative freedom, the constraints of his obligations, and the inevitable collapse that has brought him to the film's starting point, being treated for anxiety in a semi-remote health spa. What is interesting about the opening nightmare is that it shows Guido at his most vulnerable and most sympathetic. In all that comes after, such moments of exposure are rare as Guido's behavioral scripts kick in time and again when he struggles to put on appearances. The irony is that Guido is an artist who has reached a point in his career where he is at his most influential, and yet everyone makes demands on him, not the other way around. He dances around obligation, and he saturates his life with women past and present to distract him from the authentic. Yet even in the company of women, he is often powerless. Be it Carla, his sensuous but tiresome mistress, Louisa, his long-suffering wife, Claudia, the beautiful starlet who often appears as his muse, or Seragina, the robust prostitute Guido knew as a child. At one point in the film, Guido retreats into a fantasy world where all the women he has known, loved, or desired live together in his own private harem, committed to pampering Guido like a child. But even this fantasy falls apart as the women rebel, forcing Guido to subjugate them with a whip. Even his ability to create a utopia is dictated by his behavioral scripts. Early in 8½, it becomes apparent that we, the viewer, are in Fellini's mental playground. The apparent lack of structure belies a truth we cannot grasp until the very end, that this is Fellini fighting to break free from his own behavioral scripts and put his disjointed thoughts into a cohesive narrative. But this film is not about narrative. It is about process, imagery, and stream of consciousness, about the artist tilting like Don Quixote with his own learned responses. Guido's plight becomes a struggle between present reality, past memory, and fantasy. His is a study of the artistic mind unable to create because obligations and a desire to be pleasing to others prevent the imagination from running loose. Perhaps Guido's most telling moment comes when he says, "Happiness consists of being able to tell the truth without hurting anyone." Is this what the man of La Mancha meant by the impossible dream? Throughout the course of 8½, there are subtle clues to help us diagnose Guido's condition, but most of the indicators are frank and obvious. Claudia, Guido's muse, in one fantasy sequence chanting, "I want to create order, I want to create cleanliness." Guido explaining to a Monsignor that his Catholic education presents certain complexes of a truth he no longer accepts. The childhood memory of Sergina, the prostitute, a tale of service to two masters, with Guido's Catholic shame waging war with his earthly lust. And throughout the proceedings, a condescending writer appears like a Greek chorus, offering biting criticism of the film Guido is developing, which happens to be the very film we are watching. Given the dreamlike quality of this pastiche of images, it is easy to assume at first glance that 8½, does not know where it is going. But once the viewer reaches the finale, in which the entire cast appears and partakes in an effervescent circus march under Guido's direction, we realize the path Fellini chose was the only one he could have taken. No wonder writer-director Rian Johnson calls it, quote, "a portrait of a man trapped inside his own storytelling," end quote. At one point in the film, Guido protests, "I want to make an honest film. No lies, no compromises. A film that would be helpful to everyone, that would finally bury everything that's dead within us." I leave it to my fellow viewers to decide if 8½, accomplishes this goal, or if Guido's more accurate statement is, "I really have nothing to say, but I want to say it just the same." 8½, is a film that demands attention. It requires a bit of work from its audience. For those willing to put in that work, it can be abundant and rewarding. But regardless of your response, you are not likely to see another film like it. Mad Matt says, to paraphrase Guido Anselmi, "Accept it as it is. Only then can you truly discover each other."
All right, we've seen what you can do with a boy. How are you when they come a little bigger?